David Shepherd is a man who loves the big and the beautiful. His lifelong passion for steam trains, aircraft, and the giants of the animal kingdom is brought out in his paintings and prints, which hang on the walls of tens of thousands of homes throughout the world. It's made him one of the most popular artists of the century. But more important to Shepherd, it's enabled him to help preserve the things he loves most dearly. The steam trains in his private collection in Somerset. The elephants of the African bush, whose existence is threatened by poachers and the onslaught of the 20th century. The man who loves giants is a tireless fundraiser for wildlife and conservation charities. And as an artist, his order book is filled with commissions for years to come. Yet when, as a teenager, he applied to join an art school, he was turned down for lack of talent. David Shepherd believes we all have a duty to preserve the giants of our times for future generations to enjoy. And it's his dream that the items in his time capsule will remain with us forever.
Well, David, have you ever actually been back to that art school which turned you down?
No, I haven't. But I've often wondered what they think, you know, because they thought I was a total disaster, which I was in those days.
But generally speaking, the art world, if I can encompass it in that way, it doesn't actually like you because you're successful.
No, well, we haven't got hours to talk about that. I wish we had, because you see, there are two sorts. There's the successful artist, of which I'm proud to be one, who earns his living, but still enjoys doing what he's doing. I'm not doing it just for money, but it happens I am earning a very good living. And there's the art critics and the establishment, in inverted commas, based in London, which look down upon a successful artist as being totally unsuccessful because he associates his painting with money, which you shouldn't do. But if you've got 4 kids to educate, then you've got to associate money with your painting. It's like a business, like anything else.
You could have been even more successful. That first print of yours, The Wise Old Elephant, I mean, it went right round the world.
Yes. Yeah, Wise Old Elephant. Yes, I remember taking that to the publishers. This is 1962. And they said, nobody's going to buy a print of an elephant. And it rocketed to the top. And it even outplaced Tretyakov. Do you remember Tretyakov, the South African
artist?
Green
Ladies.
The Green Ladies.
Yes.
It kicked him out of the top 10, top of the pops, and I was in instead. And I even ousted Canaletto.
So how many has that sold?
100,000 copies, it's reckoned. I wish I'd done it on a royalty basis, because I could have made a lot of money, but I didn't.
In fact, though, you could have gone on making more prints, couldn't you?
Yes, well, a transition came in about 1967 when I realised, having had 3 or 4 prints, like Wise Old Elephant, in the top 10. They have this poll every year, you see, like the top 10 on Sunday evening on Radio 1. And it was getting me known, yes, in those days, which I needed and I was very grateful for. But it got to the point where, with the success of Wise Old Elephant, every publisher in England rang me up and said, can we do an elephant? This wonderful. They wanted to jump on the elephant bandwagon because I put them on the map, you see. And I had to sort of think, one half of me thought, well, that's going to pay the bills if I say yes to all those publishing offers. It'll pay my school fees for my kids for years to come. But the other half of me warned me what could happen if I over-popularised myself. Too many prints around, people say, oh God, he's not that artist who's everywhere in Boots the Chemist and the chain stores. So I said no, and I'm very grateful I did, because I went into limited editions at that stage in my life in 1967. And I'm only doing limited editions now, which means that people can still buy my prints, but they're special, you know, in the sense that they're limited and they're investments, if you like, and they're expensive. And I've retained my integrity as well, which means people still want my paintings, my originals. I get attacked. I mean, people write to me and say, oh, I wish you'd go back into Boots the Chemist so we can still forge your prints for a tenner a time instead of 200. But it's awfully difficult. You can't please everybody.
So although art school turned you down, you became a very successful artist, and in no short measure due to the Devon artist, Robin Goodwin.
Indeed, yes. Well, I owe him everything, you see, because I was chucked out. Well, I never even got into the Slade School of Fine Art, as you've just said. I showed them my work and they said, you are so diabolically awful, you're not worth training. And I was literally on the point of driving a bus for a living. I really was. I mean, I couldn't do anything else except drive a bus. I'd love to drive a bus, except that I would have liked to have driven wherever I wanted, and I wouldn't have liked to have been told where to go around all the shop. But I met Robin Goodwin at a cocktail party. By sheer chance, I met this man, and I owed 100% of my success to him. Well, it was about 0.5% talent and 99.5% training. and he shook me by the scruff of my neck and was absolutely foul to me. And he's a lovely man. I mean, we're deepest of friends now, but he was an absolute swine.
So
that's the way to teach. I mean, he was an absolute swine because he wanted to drum into me the common sense business of treating it as a business, like a farmer. He said a farmer earns his living farming, you're going to be earning your living painting pictures.
So an essential ingredient for the time capsule. But what sort of things were you painting in those days?
Unspeakably awful pictures of birds and the flying variety. Well, I think they were flying, but you couldn't tell. They were unbelievable. I'm not surprised that the Slade School will shut me out, actually, because they were unspeakable. I mean, I had no
So
training
why did
in
Robin have confidence in
God
you?
knows. I will never know the answer to that. I showed him my work. I met him at the party, and he said, well, I'm not going to teach you because I haven't got the time and I don't need the money and I'm too busy. And that was the end of it. But he said, if you want me to see your work, you bring it up tomorrow and I'll see it, to confirm what the Slade School have told you, that you're dreadful. And I took my work up and showed him, and he said, you want me to teach you? And I don't know to this day. Ask me, I don't know. He must have seen something.
There was a period with him of doing sort of debutante and society paintings.
Oh,
wasn't there?
hysterical. I mean, the fun we had. Well, I lived his life for 3 years. If he had a commission to paint Westminster Bridge, I painted it with him. If he had a debutante to paint, and poor man, he had about 500 debutantes in one summer to paint, and these awful pudding-faced girls of about 14 and 15 came in their Dior gowns at 10 in the morning to his studio in Tite Street. And Mummy very often used to come as well. So Mummy used to come in case Robin was naughty and did something other than paint their portraits. But the incentive to do anything other than paint their portraits at 10 in the morning when they had faces like puddings anyway.
It wasn't that glamorous.
It didn't come. And I was doing these girls with him, but it nearly killed both of us. But it was all marvellous training, wonderful training.
So after that training, you developed or progressed, really, an earlier love for aircraft. Now, you've asked for the time capsule, part of the Battle of Britain. Is this really the wartime years? Is that where that love for aircraft started?
Yeah, well, you see, I was 8 years old in the Battle of Britain. And when you're 8 years old, to a schoolboy, living in London, we had our windows blown out and we collected bits of incendiary bombs. They fell next door and that sort of thing before the police got there. And it was so exciting. We didn't understand or appreciate that war was people killing each other. I mean, we didn't think of that. We didn't think of the blood and the guts side of it at all. And instead of swapping dinky toys when you went to school, you took bits of Heinkel wingtip and Crash Messerschmitt tail fin and you swapped them with all the other grubby little snotty boys like I was. And it was terrifically exciting. And I remember we used to queue up with a lot of other little grubby boys. They used to, you probably, well, you don't because you weren't even born on this day, but captured German aircraft used to be put on display, you see, in the local village centre or town centre. And an old Home Guard boy of about 110 years old would stand at the bottom of the ladder to see that you didn't do anything naughty. You paid your sixpence, which went to help buy a Spitfire. You climbed up the ladder, had your allotted 3 minutes in the cockpit, and down the other side for the next kid to climb up. And in 10 minutes, we'd annihilated that airplane. More damage was done to that airplane by us little boys than the RAF did shooting it down. But it was terrific fun. That was the war, you see.
Just before midday, on Sunday, September the 15th, 1940, 3 waves of German bombers and fighters crossed the English Channel heading for London. Their aim was to tempt the British to commit their fighters to a losing battle. That day in September was to go down in history. It was the climax of the Battle of Britain.
It's amazing footage. I wonder if you would have felt the same about those lovely aircraft if you'd actually been flying in the Battle of Britain. As a small boy, it was exciting.
No, you see, we were blinkered with the romance of it. And that romance isn't the word. I don't think it is. I don't know what the word is. But as I said before, you know, you didn't appreciate that it was people killing each other. It was just exciting. And you didn't think of it. We were only small boys. But, yeah, that's really all you can say. You never thought more deeply than that. And I feel slightly ashamed now that we didn't. You know, when I was at public school, I remember the world announcing Belsen and Buchenwald and those ghastly horrors. And there we were in our closeted little, careful, tidy existence in our public schools in Buckinghamshire, only about 200 miles away. eating regular meals and everything. And that fills me with a sense of some shame now, but that's a lot later.
Well, on the happier side of nostalgia, something else you've asked for from that period, for the time capsule, Glenn Miller.
Oh.
Now, I'm a great fan of Glenn Miller, but why do you want him?
Well, I just shake with emotion, you see. I paint to music, and that's just one sort of music that I just shake with. I can't paint when I'm listening to Glenn Miller. And, of course, I have a particular reason for loving Glenn Miller, because not only is that period, but I know James Stewart. Jimmy Stewart's a dear friend of ours, and I met him through the Glenn Miller story, and I know him as a close friend of the family now, and I just shake. I cry when I listen to Glenn Miller. Everybody does, because it's that period. It's nostalgia.
Well, don't cry now, because we're going to see it.
Now listen to this. Now what? Pennsylvania 6, 5,000. Remember?
Yes.
Pennsylvania 6, 5,000.
Would you like to make this a really memorable evening?
Uh-huh.
Then dance with me.
Oh, but in front of all these people?
Well, sure. In all the years we've been married, you've never danced with me.
That's right.
And I may never get another chance.
Oh, here we go. Now.
Pennsylvania 6, 5,000.
Good.
Wonderful film.
Can't we have the rest of that? Oh, God.
And of course,
I'm
Jimmy
crying.
Stewart, as you say, the star of that, went on to become a great conservationist, didn't he?
Yes, indeed. Well, we met through that, really. Actually, I was at Cape Canaveral watching an Apollo launch, and Jimmy was there, and I was introduced to him, and we immediately started talking about conservation, because he used to be a hunter, and like many hunters who went to Africa in the old days to shoot, he became a conservationist, and his wife, Gloria, is a director of a lot of the big zoos in America, and they're fanatical, both of them. So obviously we had that terrific rapport, Glenn Miller and conservation of wildlife. So that's triggered it off.
Well, it was your painting of aircraft which led to you becoming a conservationist and a painter of jumbos. Exactly how did that happen?
Well, the RAF, God bless them, you see, I started, as you know, by painting aircraft after I'd finished my training with Robin Goodwin, and through that I started painting for the RAF, and the RAF are marvellous, because they used to sort of say, well, would like a picture of Hong Kong or Malaya, and I would say, well, I can't paint it unless you show me, so they would fly me out on Transport Command, on the taxpayer, and show me, which was a fabulous way of seeing the world for free, and the RAF adopted me in a way, and commissioned all these pictures. They then took me out to Aden in 1960, and from Aden I went down to Kenya, where it was still Kenya and not Kenya. You know, the British were still there. And the RAF in Nairobi said, this was 1960, the RAF in Nairobi said, we'd like a couple of pictures for the officers' mess, but we don't want aeroplanes because we fly those all day. Do you do local things like jumbos? And I said, good God, no, but I'll have a try. And the very first elephant I ever painted was for the Royal Air Force, 25 pounds, including the frame. They've lost it now. Nobody knows where it is.
Yes. And at that same time, did the conservationist...
Yeah, because everything happened on that trip. That was the catalyst in my life, that visit to Kenya in 1960, because after I'd done my time with the RAF and my fun with the RAF, I went down to Tanzania with my wife, and we went out in a Land Rover belonging to the warden, with the game warden, and we found 255 zebra lying dead on the ground around a poisoned waterhole. Now, when you've seen that, at that particular time when your career, my career, was immediately taking off as a wildlife artist, because it did. I mean, from the moment I painted that first elephant picture, I've never looked back, and I'm proud and humbled to be able to say that. I've had a 2-year backlog of commissioned work ever since. That's what wildlife did for me, right from the beginning, changed my life. So having seen that waterhole, that meant obviously that I felt possibly I can do something for wildlife that's doing so much for me. So, and I became a conservationist. And the more you see, the more you're motivated. And I mean, my God, we need 2 hours.
Can you remember what your feelings were when you saw those dead zebra? And in fact, we've got a clip of film of you by a dead elephant in Africa. What were your feelings?
The initial feeling, which is now permanently with me, is of one utter amazement. The depths to which man can descend in depravity, treating his fellow creatures like that. I mean,
Why does he do it?
Well, in 2 words, crass stupidity. I mean, that covers everything else, crass stupidity. It covers greed, ignorance, everything else. But basically, it's crass stupidity, because he hasn't got the common sense to stop and think. We've got to stop wrecking our world. It's as simple as that. And I mean, you can go on, and I won't because there's no time anyway, but there's a whole chapter of things I've seen, like baby seals being bashed on the head for just to provide a few miserable pelts for a few miserable people who want to wear sealskin slippers, and leopards having red hot pokers stuck up the back ends of them. Did you know that? You didn't probably. Well, you do, because I've told you before. In Tanzania, to stop, to avoid shooting them through the bars of the trap, thereby making a hole in the coat so that the fashion houses won't buy that skin for a fur coat, they stick a red hot poker up the back end of the leopard. The catch hold of the tail.
But
you
is
see.
that sort
and
of
that
thing
there is no
still
limit.
going on?
It's still going on, and worse. And you'll probably have phone calls after this, but I hope so, because there's been a great change of heart over conservation in the last 10 years. If I'd said what I've just said to you 10 years ago, people will have switched off. They said, "No, I don't want to hear the rest," and they would switch the television off. Now it's different. People say, "My God, does that happen? Thank you for telling us."
So what are we doing about it?
Well, it's too big a question to answer. We are beginning to do something about it, and the greatest incentive to the privileged people like myself, and I use the word privilege because it is a privilege to have the chance to get on the media, certainly television, and knowing people are watching, to speak up for wildlife and the habitat, because somebody's got to speak up for it. And I have people write to me and say, "Go on saying what you're saying, David, because I can't get on the telly, you can." And people are responding now, and that alone makes it the incentive to go on doing it, the motivation, knowing you've got that backup.
But the snag is, I'm perhaps being pessimistic here, but man is essentially a greedy animal. It seems part of his makeup is inherent. Are we ever going to cure man? Because that's where the basic illness lies, isn't it?
You have to just hope that, for God's sake, we will, before we all descend into oblivion. Because, I mean, conservation, you see, doesn't mean now just saving tigers and saving lions and saving elephants. I mean, people are killing elephants for ivory. That's terrible. And the elephant will probably be an endangered species in 10 years' time. That in itself is a catastrophe. So is the tiger situation. But we don't talk like that anymore. We've got to talk globally now about the habitat. And the habitat is what we've got to talk about. Tropical rainforests, that's what I mean by the habitat. Or English hedgerows. It's both equally important. If you destroy the habitat, everything goes with it too, including us. Because this is the message we've got to get over, that we depend totally on the other species around us, whether they're trees or the air or the sea or everything around us. We're all part of that pattern. And if we destroy it at the rate we're destroying, we finally go as well. I'm not talking about in my lifetime, your lifetime. I'm talking about 300, even possibly 500 years' time.
What do you say, though, to these people who say there are more important things to worry about? There are many starving people in the world who have to be fed. There are many diseases which have to be cured. Wildlife and conservation should perhaps take
second
a lower
place.
step.
It doesn't take second place, it takes equal place. We're all on this world together. People and animals and trees all share this planet. We all have a right to survive equally. Okay, to your question, but surely people are more important. If you adopt that complete philosophy all the time that people are more important, then we follow that path that I've just described. Everything goes to our benefit, but actually to our short-term benefit, but our ultimate loss, because we finally go too. And these disasters like Ethiopia, which everybody knows about, and all this wonderful money that's being raised, well-meaning people, wonderful, marvellous. But in the long term, you've got to find the solution in telling them how to conserve the soil and conserve the resources around them so that they can grow more food, so that people don't die. And those disasters like Ethiopia are man-made anyway. They're man-made. I'm totally convinced of this by the damage we've done to this little tiny world we're sitting on, like cutting down the tropical rainforests of the world at 150 acres every minute. Now, by the time I finish talking to you, we'll have destroyed several square miles of tropical rainforest forever. That, in turn, upsets the ecosystem, which means it doesn't rain, which means people don't grow crops, which means they die of starvation. It's our own bloody fault. And this is the message.
So looking ahead 100 years, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic?
You've got to be optimistic, otherwise I'd have given up years ago. And I must be optimistic because of the backup that I've told you already. And when I go to Zambia and I talk to 500 little African primary children in one audience, they all speak English, and they're dead keen. They're not just killing all their animals, which a lot of stupid people in this country think they are. Oh, well, the Africans are independent now, they'll go and kill everything. How ignorant can you be? I have that sort of thing said to me by people in England who ought to know better. They are so concerned, and so you've got to give them that support and back them up.
So you're fairly cheerful about the
Yes.
future, fairly optimistic?
Well, in some cases you've got to be, but if you take individual things like the whale, I mean, no, because the Japanese and the Russians have already said they'll go on killing whales.
Would you actually like to be in a position where you can step outside this planet, look down at this planet, and then sort of get a much better whole concept?
Yes, I'd love to, but I mean, you see, the nearest thing I've ever been to that is actually to meet a man who's actually done that. This must be in the Guinness Book of Records. There's the longest time I haven't opened my mouth. I actually stayed silent for 25 minutes when I had the privilege and thrill to meet Neil Armstrong in America about 5 years ago. And to meet a man who's actually stepped back at a distance of 286,000 miles and looked at us on this tiny little planet, and he said one thing to me which I've never forgotten. He said, as I was getting into my space capsule to come back to Earth, and when you think about that, and all the viewers think about that, I mean, none of us can contemplate that. It's beyond our comprehension, but he's done it. And he said, as I looked through the window and I saw planet Earth, and he went like this with his fingers, and he said it was about the size of a golf ball, and I could see the whole of North America and the whole of South America, and it suddenly came to me, David, he said, how fragile it was. Now, that word fragile is the simplest word imaginable, but he used that word, and I use it every time I quote him, because he's a man who saw it a long way away. And however bloody clever we think we are, Homo sapiens, we can't make it any bigger. And we're breeding faster than any rabbit could ever breed, and we're chewing up everything and killing and burning, not stopping to think of the long term.
So we have a fragile world handled with care.
Absolutely, and we're not handling it with very much care.
Well, that experience of Neil Armstrong, it must have been sort of a spiritual experience. Are you yourself a religious man?
I don't know. I'm often asked that, Chris, and no, I mean, well, I'm not in the sense that I go to church. I suppose I'm an agnostic. An agnostic is a guy who sits on the fence, not quite sure. But I know
you're still making up your mind.
I could never be an atheist through that painting of Christ I did, which I wish we had time to talk about more. Because
well, tell us about that painting, actually, because I mean that is an extraordinary story in itself.
How long have we got? I wish we. Oh gosh. Well, many years ago, it was 1964. I was suddenly asked out of the blue to paint a picture of Christ for an army church, and I mean, Rembrandt used models, and I'm not a Rembrandt. No way. And I was so honoured and overcome by the flattery of being asked that I said yes. And I remember on my way home, I stopped the car in a lay-by, and I started sweating, and I thought, my God, what have I done? I've only painted about 3 portraits when I was training.
And those were Spotty Debs?
Spotty Debs, absolutely, in Chelsea. And here I was being asked to paint Christ. Well, it's a fiendishly long story. It's hysterically funny, most of it, but I haven't got time to tell the whole thing. But everything just clicked into place like no other painting I've done 3,000 paintings since I began my career. Nothing else has ever clicked like that one did. Everything just worked. But the army, they said, you better get on with it, because we booked the Chaplain General to the forces to consecrate it. You've got to get on with it. And 4 years later, I still hadn't started it. When I got a note where to park my car for the consecration service, the Chaplain General was coming to consecrate it, and I had 15 feet of bare canvas in my studio, 3 weeks before I was due to start it. And we had a dinner party that evening, and I was ill. I was so worried. I mean, I had visions of the Chaplain General consecrating it in instalments, coming back, saying, well, I'll come back next month and do another bit. It was all fun. All the generals were coming and everything. And one of our guests that evening at a small little dinner was a group captain friend of ours in the RAF. And as he was going, he said something to me. I remember exactly what he said, the most significant thing I've ever had said to me by anybody. He said, David, I know you're ill with worry about that painting you've got to do tomorrow, and you've got 3 weeks to do it, and it's going to be consecrated, da-da-da-da-da. I don't go to church, I don't think you do either, but you are going to have some sort of extra help. Not religious help, he said extra help, I don't know, doing that painting. And I did, and it's the most moving thing I've ever experienced in my life. And, well, there we are.
Well, you say not religious help. I mean, do you believe there was an outside force at work there, controlling the brush?
There's something. I wish I could answer it. But all I will say, Chris, is that when I'm dead, and by some miracle, which won't happen, I'm remembered by anything I've ever painted, I don't want it to be elephants, I don't want it to be steam trains, I don't want it to be anything. I want it to be that one painting of Christ. It won't be, because nobody knows it's there. It's an army church in Hampshire. The army are lovely, but...
But that's the one painting you want to be remembered by?
It is, absolutely it is, yes.
There's part of David Shepherd in that, is there?
There's all my life went into that painting. Yes, absolutely. And I can't say it more than that, because I'm, not very good at expressing myself when we get down to things like this. I do my best.
I wouldn't say that at all.
That subject was just magic, and the way it all happened. Unbelievable.
Well, David, I first met you, 10 years ago, and you left a lasting impression on me as the man who does everything at the double. I mean, you're always running when you could be walking. Are you slowing down yet?
No, because you see, the longer I live, Chris, and I hope I'm going to be on the round for a few more years, the more I feel an obligation to go on doing what I'm doing already, but even more so because, people say, aren't you marvellous to raise £1 million or whatever it is for wildlife? It's not marvellous at all. It's an obligation for wildlife, for what wildlife's done for me. And I use that word privilege again. I've got a privileged position, like a few others in conservation, where we can speak for all those who can't get on the telly. And that's an obligation. When you've seen the sites I've seen, on which I've touched just briefly, and wildlife's done so much for me. They bought me my steam engines, they've given me my standard of living, which I'm enjoying now with my wife and family, and you have an obligation. So I'm going to go on doing it even faster. I've got my health, which thank God I've got.
So it's a very big question to ask, a difficult one to answer, but before you die, what improvements, briefly, would you like to see in this world?
Oh my gosh. Oh, hell, I didn't know you were going to ask me that. What improvements? Well, do something about the breed rate, the reproduction rate of men, for a start, mankind rather.
Cut down the population?
Yeah, for God's sake. That's the whole answer to everything, isn't it? Because you can't make the world any bigger, as I said earlier. So we've got to stop breeding like rabbits. Learn from the mistakes we've made in the past, and the worst mistakes we've been making are in the last 40 years, in my lifetime. Since World War II, we've been doing more catastrophic damage to the little world we're sitting on than all the rest in history. And that's surely that's the improvement we've got to make. in the most general terms. I don't think we've got time to answer that question more precisely. Many personal things I'd like to see. I'd like to keep these bloody 40-ton Freightliners off these minor roads in England. I mean, they're smashing my old Elizabethan farmhouse to pieces in Surrey at the moment. They ought to be
you
on
say
the
that,
M6.
although
Oh, get me on that.
But what's the difference between a steam train and a Freightliner? I mean, they're both big giants, aren't they?
A lot, yes, but the former I love and the latter I don't, I'm afraid. Maybe in 50 years' time, and I'm dead anyway, but in 50 years' time, if I come again, I might say, gosh, isn't that a lovely, great Freightliner? But I very much doubt it. There's no romance in a Freightliner, one of these bloody great things.
Romance and nostalgia play a big part in your life, don't they?
It completely dominates my life now. Romance and nostalgia and conservation, yes.
What about music?
Again, as I said with Glenn Miller, I can't. Every time I switch Glenn Miller on my machine in the studio, I can't paint. I start shaking. Well, Mahler even more. Depending on my mood, I can have everything from the Beatles to Count Basie to Mahler to brass bands to Sousa to Glenn Miller and Elgar and Mahler and Strauss and da-da-da. That's quite a dishful for a start. But if I have to choose one, it's got to be Mahler. Mahler, well, there's no limit to my adulation for that man because he seems to sum up all my feelings. And the end of his Resurrection Symphony, I mean, I went with my daughter Mandy to see it in the festival hall live, and we were creased up at the end. I mean, all evening, about a 1,000-piece orchestra, it seemed like that anyway, and singers and choir. Oh, and my daughter and I, my daughter, happily, my second daughter, who was totally dotty like I am about Mahler, we both leapt up and started screaming with delight and cheering and yelling, and everybody else around us, they're a lot of boring people, they all said, shush. Well, I can't understand that, because you should become part of great music like that and react. And we almost felt embarrassed because we were the only two in the festival hall to show any reaction at all. I thought, what a boring lot of bloody people. Anyway, that didn't worry because I reacted and I said thank you, Mahler, anyway, for what he'd done for me, which was a lot.
Well, thank you, David Shepherd. We'll end with Mahler in the hope that you don't burst into tears through it as well.
Fabulous, I probably will.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.